For us, the amount of hours we run, you need something that's really easy to work on.
Yeah.
And like the inside, the barrel of this is all custom. And I think you'd have a hard time, like it'd be a full-time job for somebody maintaining it.
Imagine stumbling upon a hidden treasure in the middle of nowhere. Deep in the wild, far from any working mines, Parker Schnabel found a giant, rusty old machine called a trommel. This wasn't just any piece of junk. It was a massive 40-foot-long beast, 6.5 feet wide, built long ago when miners were all about digging up as much dirt as they could, as fast as possible. Back in the day, this trommel was a total powerhouse, chewing through mountains of dirt to find gold. But here's the catch. Old machines like this weren't great at grabbing the tiny bits of gold. A lot of that fine, glittery stuff slipped through the cracks and got stuck inside the machine over time. So, what looked like a forgotten pile of rust might actually be a gold mine in disguise. Before proceeding further with the video, please subscribe to the channel Parker couldn't resist. He'd seen plenty of abandoned mining gear before, but something about this one sparked his curiosity. Half a season had passed, and despite the non-stop grind of mining, running machines 24/7, fixing breakdowns and keeping everything moving, he decided to take a closer look. He climbed up onto the trommel and started digging through layers of dirt and grime that had piled up for decades. At first, it just seemed like a rusty old relic. But then, bam! A tiny shimmer of gold caught his eye. Could it be real? Had this treasure been sitting there, untouched, all these years? The more he looked, the more he found. Little specks of gold buried deep inside the machine's worn-out shell. What started as a wild guess turned into a jaw-dropping discovery. This trommel wasn't just hiding a little gold, it was loaded with it, worth an estimated $400 million. Crazy, right? Somehow, the original miners never came back for it. Maybe they went broke, or just gave up. Parker's hunch paid off big time. Turns out, this rusty giant wasn't trash. It was a fortune waiting to be found. Picture this, a massive, rusty gold machine abandoned in the wild because the original miners hit a wall they couldn't climb. Maybe money troubles or tough conditions. Whatever happened, they walked away, leaving a fortune behind. Now, Parker Schnabel had stumbled onto this hidden jackpot, but there was a catch. Getting that gold wasn't going to be easy. First off, the trommel, this giant, crumbling beast, was falling apart. Moving it out of the wilderness was a nightmare. We're talking a heavy, 40-foot-long monster that needed cranes, trucks, and some serious planning just to budge it over the rough, bumpy ground without breaking it more. Then came the real challenge, fixing it. Parker's crew had to roll up their sleeves and replace rusty gears, patch up busted screens, and shore up the huge steel drum that made the whole thing work. It was like bringing an old dinosaur back to life. Time wasn't on their side either. They'd already tested a couple of setups that day, and it went well, but decisions had to be made fast. The clock was ticking, and they couldn't afford to mess around. The work was tough, slow, and sweaty, but Parker and his team weren't about to quit. They knew the prize was worth it. While they were at it, they decided to check the piles of dirt around the trommel just in case. And holy cow, what a surprise! That dirt wasn't just decent, it was packed with gold, way more than anyone expected. Every scoop they tested sparkled with riches, far better than your average mining spot. This wasn't just a lucky find, it was a once-in-a-lifetime bonanza. Parker jumped into action, setting up a mini processing plant right there to keep things rolling smoothly. He mixed old-school mining tricks with some modern tech to make sure not a single fleck of gold slipped away. His crew worked non-stop, piecing the trommel back together while uncovering its wild history. Turns out, this machine wasn't a lone wolf. Old records showed it was part of a huge mining network, shuffling dirt between different sites. If this trommel had been quietly hoarding gold for decades, who knows what other forgotten spots might be hiding out there? Parker wasn't just sitting on one treasure. He might have cracked open the door to a whole treasure map. Think of those old records as a treasure map, guiding Parker to even more exciting finds. This wasn't just about fixing up a rusty machine anymore. It was like flipping open a lost page of gold mining history. For weeks, Parker and his crew poured their hearts into the job. Every banged-up panel and rusty bolt they worked on whispered tales of miners who'd risked it all chasing their dreams. Bringing this trommel back to life wasn't only about the gold, it felt like a nod to those hard-working folks from long ago. Take Gold Run, for example, a creek so rich it practically oozed treasure, flowing right into places like Dominion, probably smack in that very spot. The deeper they dug, the wilder it got. The gold just kept coming, way more than anyone had dreamed of. What started as a beat-up old relic turned into one of the biggest hauls Parker had ever scored. Standing in front of that giant trommel, Parker couldn't help but take it all in. It wasn't some shiny, fancy rig. Nope, it was rough around the edges, covered in rust, with vines sneaking up its sides, and dirt stuffed into every nook. Most people would have walked by and shrugged it off as junk. But not Parker. He saw what others missed. Treasure doesn't always hide underground. Sometimes it's right there, staring you in the face, waiting for someone sharp enough to spot it. Back in its heyday, this trommel was a rock star, pulling gold out of dirt and rocks like a champ. But as time marched on, slicker, faster machines came along, and the old ones got left behind, tossed aside in far-off mining spots next to crumbling sheds and rusty tools. To the average person, it was just another forgotten piece of the past. To Parker, it was a gold mine waiting to happen. He'd picked up a trick a lot of miners miss. Old machines like this often cling to gold that never got scooped up. Over the years, tiny bits of it get stuck in the cracks, tangled up with dirt and grime. Parker's hunch paid off big time. This rusty old trommel wasn't just history. It was his ticket to a fortune. Imagine this. If that old trommel had churned through gold-packed dirt way back when, there's a good chance some of that shiny stuff was still stuck inside. This wasn't just a rusty heap. It was like a secret gold vault, just begging to be opened. But getting it out of the wild was no picnic. This thing was huge, weighing tons, and parked miles away from any decent road. Moving it took serious muscle. Big machines, careful teamwork, and a whole lot of grit. One slip-up, and the whole plan could flop, leaving them with nothing but a pile of scrap. But Parker's crew? They weren't quitting. They mapped out every move like pros, knowing that if they pulled it off, they wouldn't just be hauling an old machine, they'd be bringing a legend back to life. Now, some setups are small and nimble, easy to roll around on wheels, perfect for little jobs, like a 50 or 60-yard-an-hour wash plant. Handy, sure, but way too tiny for this beast. Parker needed a supersized version to match the trommel's massive potential. Once they hauled it to a safe spot, the hard part kicked in. Years of wind, rain, and sun had beaten it up bad. Rust had chewed through key pieces, metal was frail, and some bits were flat out gone. To most folks, it looked like a lost cause. Not to Parker. He and his team dove in, tearing it apart piece by piece, scrubbing off rust, swapping out busted parts, and beefing up the weak spots. But they didn't just patch it up. They leveled it up. They mixed in modern tech to make it tougher and sharper. blending that old-school toughness with today's smarts. It was like building a one-of-a-kind mining superhero. Rock-solid roots meets next-level power. After weeks of non-stop hustle, the big moment hit. They flipped the switch, and the trommel roared awake. That giant drum spun like a champ, chewing through dirt and rocks, spitting out gold like it was born for it. And then, boom, the real shocker. Gold started flowing out in piles, way more than anyone guessed. Some of the dirt that old machine had touched held the richest gold Parker had ever laid eyes on. This wasn't just a win, it was a jackpot. That rusty old machine, left for dead by everyone else, ended up being one of Parker Schnabel's biggest wins. But this wasn't just about striking gold, it was about guts, grit, and spotting a diamond in the rough when others saw trash. It showed that with hard work, a little risk, and a sharp eye, even a forgotten relic could turn into something amazing. Parker didn't just bring an old trommel back to life, he flipped the whole mining game on its head. His crew mixed the best of yesterday's gear with today's tricks, making mining smarter, cleaner, and way more efficient. They cut down on waste while raking in more gold, setting a new bar for doing things right. Word spread fast, and other miners started paying attention. Parker's big win sparked a whole new gold rush, not out in untouched wildlands, but in the rusty leftovers of history, just waiting for someone bold enough to wake them up. Want to catch more gold fever? Hit that subscribe button and jump into the adventure. Lost treasures, hidden riches, and epic gold finds are calling.